with Stephen Mullan, who is definitely one of my most amazing human beings that's in my life and one of the most creative people. There's no audience to clap for you, dude.
Oh, I was waving to everybody. I thought we had a 360 audience.
I mean, if you want one, we might be able to hook that up. Well, you could for sure.
That for the future.
Okay, cool. Stephen is a incredibly creative human being. Probably one of the most creative human beings. Kind of an old school creative, I'd say. How do you feel about that moniker?
Thank you. Well, I don't actually know what an old school creative is.
Well, let me explain what that might be. Stephen is one of those, in today's music industry, everybody's trying to get things done quickly because things are expensive. And there's not a lot of budget in this world.
I'm slow. That's all it means. I take my time.
It doesn't mean that you're slow. It means that you would, if it were up to you, you would chase a musical sound pretty much for the entire day. Like a tone.
Oh, yeah. I did, on one song, I did like 97 different productions of one song.
Like full-on productions?
Yeah, a few years ago, and then I realized that I really need to move on. And
which one did you take?
And I don't know
like
why.
17?
I don't know what's inside of me that makes me continue to do that. But you're trying to always capture now and the feeling that you have now, and then you eventually have to realize that you're never going. You have to move on. That you have to find a sort of point that then allows you to reach to the next point. Because if you continue to chase things and chase things and chase things, of course, the universe is enormous.
So how do you look at, I mean, the way that I would look at music would be, it would be a snapshot of that moment. Do you not look at it as a snapshot of that moment? Because you're saying it has to be now.
No. Especially once I got introduced to like the jam band world and coming from the classical world, which is so not rigid, but just so perfectly planned and so well executed, going then into just listening to the jam band culture, I think kind of changed my perspective of what a song is. And a song is ever changing, it's ever growing. And just because you do this one recording here, that's not that song, that's the feeling of that song that you're trying to communicate, you know? And maybe in the future we can have these things in our brains where we can just emote the feeling that we're trying to get across and transfer it from my body to your body. But for now, we have music, and that's the feeling that I think I'm always trying to get, because it's exciting and thrilling to be able to capture, yes, that's what I wanted to get across, and this groove and this, the way this is orchestrated and everything is making it feel that way. And in a live setting, the live performance of something is going to be totally different than the recorded version, but if they're synonymous in the emotional, in the emotion that they're conveying, I think that's...
Does the emotion go across both recordings, or can the emotion change?
I think it can change, but I like being able to almost taste the feeling of, if it's like Let's Stay Together, no matter how you play that song, it gives you the same feeling that recording gives you. You know, you can mess it up, play. Is
that the lyrics, or is that, what is that?
It's magic. I don't know. I think the lyrics, the arrangement of it, if anyone else other than Al Green played the song.
You know, what if a pop punk band plays it? Does it change it? Or is that sacrilegious?
Yeah, honestly, if a pop punk band played it, it'd be pretty awesome.
It would be pretty
Especially
awesome.
when they went to the flat 3.
Yes.
In the court.
Yeah. Yes.
I could totally hear that.
Yeah.
At Van's Warped Tour.
Oh, hell yeah.
Let's Stay Together. I could totally
I think
hear
Weezer just covered something. What did they cover? Everybody was up in arms about it. Did you see anything about that?
Can we go back to the old school thing?
You don't want to talk about Weezer?
Well, sadly, I haven't kept up with pop culture enough to
okay. Sorry about
to
that.
know about Weezer.
Well, let's talk about what you are then, compared to what other people are in that creative world. Is I know Malcolm Gladwell did a really great thing of talking about the difference between the long, like the creators that create over that are never satisfied, and then the people that do it in 10 minutes. And he used like Leonard Cohen as and Hallelujah as an example of the person that's always tinkering. And supposedly Cohen was writing lyrics to Hallelujah up until he passed away. And him and Bob Dylan would always have battles about a creative process because Dylan would wrote like a Rolling Stone in like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And just left it. So there was also he would talk about. I mean, do you feel that that's the way? Do you feel like you're never satisfied with something?
I think what's nice is that within the creative community, everyone has a different way that they accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. And for some people, they get done in 10 minutes, and it's awesome. And we're all different. And the beautiful thing, I think, in music is that it's a place where the person who wrote the song in 10 minutes can get together with the person that takes 3 years to write the song, and they can do this thing. But I think I especially like an artist like D'Angelo. It speaks like heavily to me in terms of the amount of time that you can just feel that the albums are crafted. Like you can.
That's a good example. I didn't think about that.
And I, yeah, he's one that kind of just blows me away.
Well, what's your take though on the idea of imperfections in music? Or do you feel like you're trying to, what are you trying to capture that you're not capturing in like the first 96 production things? Like, what are you trying to capture?
Well, that was ignorance, I think. And you then have to reach a point where you feel confident enough that you are capturing the truth.
Does that ever come though? I mean, Cohen died trying to finish Hallelujah.
Well, the nice thing is you'll have so many different things you're working on that I'm sure Hallelujah was one, but he probably wasn't going after all of his songs that way. There was probably certain ones that he was okay with letting them go. And the kind of strange and messed up thing is that they almost feel like babies. They feel like children to you, but they're imaginary. There's like spiritual, imaginary children or something like that. And when you create something like that, you want to raise it and foster it and have the world see it in a way that is like, yeah, that's my baby. That's like, yeah, check out my baby. In the same way that a father or a mother is like wanting their child to grow up and be a wonderful addition to society. And maybe that's the thing that propels us to.
Well, how do you? So then, what's your view on when your child is done, if it's ever done? Is that something that's like a longevity thing for you? So that if you look back on your life, that you want to feel like what is the purpose of raising that child? I mean, obviously you need to do it; it's in your soul. But is there a purpose, or are you just doing it because you need to?
Sometimes it is boredom. You're like.
Tinkering is boredom, or doing?
Yeah, sometimes you tinker with things that are that come from the fact that you're bored and you can't think of anything else to do with. I don't know why we obsess with certain things. I feel like I'm meandering right now, so.
Well, what do you mean? So tinkering, when you're talking about tinkering, are we talking about tinkering with fine details, or are we tinkering with this large process of what something is becoming? I mean, obviously, the fine details create what is coming and what is this big overall structure. But what do you tinker with mostly?
Oh man, that's such an amazing question, and all I can think about right now is how great the coffee is.
Are you deflecting because the question really deflecting. Isn't that great?
I'm deflecting. No, the question's wonderful.
I guess if I were to I've seen you tinker. I mean, I've been in the studio.
It's also it's an unhealthy habit, I think, because especially some of the things we've done over the past year, for example, the mixes, like some of the mixes, the first mix that we did and that we were okay with and that we put out on this one thing still has this different energy to it, and then certain depending what the song needs, like certain songs need that to feel a little loose, and even in the making of it should feel like that. And then there's other songs that are a little more specific and focused, and it's like every one is a different shade. And I think trying to figure out what the song is trying to tell and the story of the song and what color it's trying to be paired with, and then accepting that and rolling with that, and then accepting everything that goes with it allows you to almost finish it, because then the ones that are yellow over here, you let them be yellow, and then the ones that are blue, you let them be blue, and then the ones that are red, you work on them and craft them, and then you get them so that they're red. And that's kind of how I've been trying to see it.
That's so simple though. I'm gonna call bullshit on that.
Yeah.
Because I don't believe that you see it as simply red. I mean, I think that you're oversimplifying what.
Yeah, I'm oversimplifying it. It definitely it's a amalgamation. Is that the right word? Of colors, but
of course, yeah.
But I think
it's
kind
a
of
painting.
seeing it like that, because I've always seen it as painting. I've always seen recording as making a painting, because a painting is still, and it changes with you changing. It changes with the light. It changes with all these different factors. Whereas a live performance, that's right now. That's happening right now in the moment. We are connecting on this thing, and a live recording will never capture what it feels like to be in the front row, holding hands with your best friend, dancing to your favorite song. You'll never be able to do that. You'll only be able to use the live recording to look back and do that. And I think the studio recordings are much like a painting, whereas whereas the live performance is a different thing. It's more like a video or something like that. It's moving.
So if we're looking at studio as a painting, that's what we're saying is, I think that, I mean, I've worked with you in a lot of different situations in the studio, probably more so than live stuff. And I guess my question to you is, do you feel like, to me, in my opinion, tinkering leads to more tools in your toolbox. So tinkering leads to discoveries, which means that it may or may not make it into this painting, but it probably makes it into another painting or fires you often. Like, say you discover a different color. It might or might not make it into that painting, but at least you've tinkered enough to a point where that sound could exist in another painting.
Sure.
So do you feel like what you're doing with the tinkering is tinkering to service that painting, or are you tinkering to grow more tools in your toolbox so that you can make better paintings?
Sure. You're always collecting the things you learn and using them in the future. This kind of the past 6 months that Owen, Lewis, and I have been working on is, you also have to trust your instincts, and your instincts are good. And I was the kid in school that took the test and then reviewed it 3 times, and I got an A on the test.
But would I have gotten, as fast as I could get through that?
Yeah, would I have gotten an A on the test? Like, me going back and checking through my answers 3 times.
Do you feel like did
that really make a difference? It didn't.
I was going to say, like, did you find mistakes?
Sometimes it did.
Sometimes it did.
And I think knowing, that's part of the self-discovery thing, where knowing your own flaws. And
so what would the flaw in that be? I mean, when you're talking about
the flaw in that was that recess happened at 12 noon, and I should have gone to recess. Instead, I was like, I have to get this, and I have to accomplish this, and I have to make sure that this is exactly what I want to say. And I don't know what that is. It's just this thing inside me that that I've had to use and accept. But also in studio land, like, you have to trust your instincts a lot of times, because you are on a clock, and there's more to be done. And in terms of production, you're not ever going to make much of a difference musically in producing apples from one tree. Like, you start to find that you need the whole orchard to be able to really provide things. And there's going to be some trees that just, you tried to raise them, they didn't do that well. And that's it. It's an ever-changing thing, and that's more what I'm trying to accomplish in the next years, is trusting my intuitions, trusting myself, and moving forward, trusting the imperfections. And that's music, it's imperfect. And I think that's the thing that I was trying to say 20 minutes ago.
So, I mean, then what would you say to me? So if we're talking about our tools being apples on a tree, and if you have an orchard, you have more apples to pick from. An orchard is not grown overnight. So why, and again, this could be a statement towards the music industry now, but do you feel like the longer you're in the game, the better your productions are? And then how do we kind of explain some of these producers that are coming along that haven't been around for quite some time that are having success? I think of that guy, and I can't think of his name, and he's the Owl City kid, in his parents' basement, like making all these crazy sounds.
It's just crazy.
And it's beautiful.
Sounds are magical, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a beautiful record, and I think that could be an issue though too, because you've got these sounds and then you're pigeonholed, and now they're like, okay, well, let's make another one, and you're like, but this is where I'm at. I'm picking from this one tree, and it might be a really beautiful tree, and create beautiful apples.
Yeah.
But the producers that have the longevity are the ones that can pull from other trees, and I think that we're losing that in the industry because there's just not a budget for producers and a budget for that. So hearing that you have that passion. Not only are you a producer, but you're incredible at so many other different things in the music industry. But that part of it, that concerns me a little bit for the future of the industry, because I want people to be able to pick from the orchard and not just one tree. But then what they're doing is they're picking from a great tree and creating genres.
There's a lot of what's happening, at least to me, what it looks like, and this is total just like dude that sits at home and thinks BS. It looks like our DNA, the same things that's happening where we're becoming this melting pot, and the whole world is becoming that, and it's beautiful. We're all essentially mating with each other to the point that our genetic material, there's more, like you've seen the photos of what a future person living in the United States is going to look like.
Mm-hmm. And even like thousands years ago.
I think the same thing's happening to music, where it's the music it's just the thing that I happen to love, but coming from the classical world, I think maybe messed me up a little bit in seeing that.
Or made you awesome.
Who knows?
It's not just the classical world here.
Well, what it did is...
I totally see the tie. I mean,
I see
it.
Looking at like a piece by Rossini or a piece by Wagner, or a piece by Brahms or something like that, or then the string quartets of Bartok, all those sorts of things. And now we're today's world. That way back in the day, that was the popular music, and that music was composed with so much intelligence, harmonically, melodically, and now it's just everything's getting compressed down and down and down, and it's going almost from, if we can pair the Ring Cycle by Wagner is 10 gigabytes of data,
mm-hmm.
and now we have things that give us a quick fix for 1 megabyte,
mm-hmm.
and that's kind of how music feels now, which is totally beautiful and wonderful. And the great thing is that today Wagner can still exist and still make something. That type of thing can still exist, and there's still an audience for it because there's so many people on the planet. But also there's, in terms of what's popular, that's just changing because everything's changing. The Industrial Revolution, and then now technological revolution, everything is... music is aptly paired with what's going on right now. And we like the quick fix, and that's okay, and that's wonderful, and it's cool. And I mean, I'm drinking this caffeine right now, and it feels great. I love it. Rant over.
I mean, the thing that's interesting though about what you're saying is back in a lot of those pieces and a lot of the pieces that we love today that were written, in the classical and the romantic period were written because the composer needed money and some rich person came to him and gave him the money and said, can you please write this about, like, my wife just died, can you please write me a requiem for my wife? But then they took that money and then they wrote something that mattered to them.
Yeah,
and
right.
That was such a fascinating thing because you could almost hide it in the music because there's no lyrics, obviously you have operas and stuff like that had to have a certain element of comedy and had to have a certain element of pomp and circumstance and stuff like that. But that was a beautiful thing of that time, was those pieces were being paid for by the wealthy, and they were thinking they were getting this thing that was about a thing. Mozart's Requiem is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, right.
Which happens to be my most favorite one that I've studied quite a bit.
Especially when it's sampled in Ludacris's Word of Mouth.
I did not know that.
The first. I listened to that a lot when I was 16.
Nice. Wow,
Yeah.
I didn't know
the DSE day.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I want to listen to that.
Yeah, it's great.
But it's interesting because nowadays we have that there's still people that are investing in music that have lots and lots of money, and that's never going to go away. But I think their expectations of it are different, and I could be wrong, but back in the day, the product was what mattered, and I feel like now it's kind of the hype and the associating themselves with something that is cool.
I almost think
you could disagree with me.
I agree with you, as I always do, and part of me disagrees.
You're so diplomatic.
The part of me that disagrees is not, it's not really disagreeing with you. It's more so just asking the question of
which all of this
that still exists. That whole thing still exists. Composers still get.
It's just not in the mainstream.
It's just not in the mainstream,
yeah.
And the record industry changed that. And I wish I had just a pen that could take me to the future to see, like, oh, what made it through? Did Michael Jackson make it through? Mm-hmm. Did Prince make it through?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
did Ariana Grande make it through?
Did Ariana Grande make it through? And that doesn't even matter.
It doesn't matter.
What matters
She's great. She's a badass.
Oh, yeah. Like, there's nothing I'd rather do than... No, I'm kidding. Everything has a different purpose, though. And some things, for me, like, I'll be like, oh, I don't want to listen to that. But then you put that song on in a dance studio with a bunch of hip-hop dancers, and suddenly it makes sense. Or you put it in this, and I think that's what gives me hope constantly, is that you can always make something, and there's always an audience for it. You just may not have found the right audience. Like, for example, you shouldn't get discouraged that you love 1920s music and that no one will pay you to play in the bar to play 1920s music. That's get with the program. That's the modern time. Go play in a nursing home and enjoy that, because it's awesome. Yeah. And fame and popularity, all those things.
Let's talk about the nursing home thing, because that's an interesting thing. I've never met anybody that does that. And can you explain how you got into that a little bit?
Actually, my dad suggested it because someone that he worked with had just randomly suggested it to him and said, hey, has your son ever thought of that, doing music there? And my first reaction was that of any jaded, ignorant 21-year-old pompous kid, which was like, oh, like, I don't know how I feel about that. And it's funny how it's like, I wish I could just go to myself, then when I finally opened up the door and started doing it,
so what was your first experience?
The first experience was awful. It was horrible because it was at my grandmother's nursing home, assisted living facility in Toledo, Ohio. And I went in, and I went with my friend Kevin Bilsma. He a brilliant accompanist. Like, that is his thing. Like, he accompanies vocalists better than most anyone I've ever heard. He's one of those. That's like his.
Oh
that's
man,
his thing.
that's a magic.
It is a
talent.
thing. Like,
Yeah.
and he knows French diction, German diction.
Wow.
He knows all these things. And
The unsung
I
heroes.
had studied with him in high school, and then it was like, yeah, I'm gonna go with Kevin to the nursing home, and we're gonna sing the Schumann piece, and then we're gonna sing this piece by Ronaldo Hahn, and it's gonna be great. And everyone in the nursing home just kind of like looked at me like, what is going on? And my grandma was kind of like, even my own grandma was like, what are you doing? And meanwhile, I'm like, I'm giving them the best music possible. And
Did you talk to them like that in between
yeah,
songs?
no, I didn't. But that was my internal voice.
I see. Got it.
Yeah, I would say,
Good to
hey,
know what your
everybody, but
internal
really I
voice
was saying, hey, everybody.
Syllables
And
are your
then
thing.
what I found out was music is a chance to communicate, and it's this vessel. And in that situation, know your audience. And that's the great thing about jazz is you always play to the room. You show up, you look around the room, you're like, let's do this. Let's set the tone for this thing. And with through hard lessons like showing up and playing my favorite classical songs for my grandmother's friends, I learned to change, and I accepted that, and I accepted the failure of it, and kept on, and now I've found a lot of joy in trying to discover what they love and trying to bring that to them, and if we can all sit around and sing "You Are My Sunshine," sing "Oh My Darling Clementine," do the hokey pokey, we can do a little bit of that. We can do a little bit of Glenn Miller, Louis Armstrong, Nat King Cole, and touch on some of those songs, and then go over and play the Tennessee Waltz and stuff like that. I've found a lot of joy in seeing those people come alive, because you're essentially going back in time, and you're using music as the vessel of healing, and that's taught me a lot, especially coming from the classical world, where you're so into what you're doing, and sometimes you do need to just simplify some things.
Yeah.
You know, because I wasn't a virtuoso by any means. I was not in the classical world. I was never going to be the next Pavarotti or the next Fritz Wunderlich or Ian Bostridge or anyone like that.
But it shapes you, and it makes, anytime you put effort into something, it's going to be a part of what you have moving forward for sure. I mean, I hear it. That's what makes your voice so unique to me, is that you've had that training.
Thanks.
It's hard to get out of that headspace sometimes, you know. But the diction and the way that you say words and the way that you kind of open up, you know, whereas most singers are very on the front, you know, you're a lot up in your head, you know, and it comes out. And I didn't know that about you until probably, you know, 6 months into us working together. And when you said that you were classical, I was like,
yeah,
makes sense.
it's been quite the process, because I love the way that songs make me feel. I love how concise they are. But I mean, since I was in 7th grade, I was full on vibrato, Italian, German, French, and then singing in English was like, it was weird. Like, I could talk in English, of course.
Doesn't have a French accent.
But then, yeah, singing in English was a totally different thing. If you're singing like even like a Britain piece, I mean, you sing the vowels differently, and trying to then transfer that over to like singing a song like Georgia on My Mind or something, like, it's not going to transfer, because you can't pronounce the vowels the same way. It's all the vowels.
I've been to enough concerts with operatic singers that try to throw a standard in there, and it's
oh yeah.
I mean, they're incredible singers, but it just doesn't fit the vibe for sure.
Yeah, it's that was always me, and I'm trying to find the happy medium between what I grew up doing and what I've discovered that makes me feel alive, and find that balance.
Yeah, if we go back, I want to share a story about
Yeah.
a feeling that I had that you're kind of describing, which is a feeling that I think when you make music your job, you can kind of forget this sometimes. But I remember when you told me your nursing home story the first time. I remember back, I guess about 4 years ago, I was touring Japan with a trumpet player named Dan Oxley, and we were going northern Japan to where they had the tsunami and stuff like that, and we were doing like some kind of just concerts for people. And we went to one of the hardest hit areas, and the snow was literally like the size up to houses, top of houses. And we got into this little town, and of course we ate amazing food first, and then because that tour was amazing for that. But then we walked into a nursing home, and there was probably 20 Japanese women that were anywhere from probably 80 to 95 years old, and they had grown up in a farm town, and they were all taking their nap. So, and they're all napping on the floor, and we kind of marched around them with our gear and set it up, and they started waking them all up, and when they stood up, it was really fascinating. There was, because they had been farming all their lives, their backs, they were in rough shape because they were bent over. Wow. So they were bent over almost at a 90-degree angle, and you kind of were watching this, and you were feeling really, really sad for them. I mean, I think we feel terrible and we feel empathetic when we're seeing this because I had literally run up a mountain in Katawazawa the day before, and now we're in this situation where we're seeing these people that are living the last days of their life in pain. So you're feeling this feeling, and you have your horn and you're standing there. And on this particular tour, we were playing a bunch of Japanese pieces that kind of everybody knew, and then some jazz standards, much like you did when you went to this stuff, to the homes. And I'll never forget, there was a tension in the room that I probably was the only person that was feeling, about a feeling of sadness. And then we started playing Take the A Train, and their faces lit up. They sat down and their faces lit up like I've never seen. I mean, I'm getting chills. Like, the feeling was palpable of they were, and none of them could speak English. They grew up in a northern Japanese town. I mean, there's no English in that room.
Right.
And they started clapping along, and eventually they got up and started dancing while we were playing. And I mean, it was one of the most magical moments, and it was one of the moments that I think you need every once in a while, and you can kind of lose when you make music your job. This is you're communicating with people. Like, you are speaking a language, and you are touching people.
Sure.
And I feel at times like there are a handful of moments that I look back on to remind myself about why we do this, because you can be in a session doing something that like chasing something down for a company that's like 5 revisions deep, and it's like, for some big conglomerate company, and it's like you're chasing this revision down, and you're chasing your tail, and you're chasing some ad agency's tail, and you're trying to figure it out, and you have to remember, this is not why I'm doing this. This is what's paying for me to be able to have moments where I can play for people that love what you do. So my question to you, pulling it back to that, is, how do you feel about, how do you get those moments? And I mean, I'm sure you have many of those moments as we both do, but how do you make sure that those moments don't ever leave you? Do you have a compartment that you put them in? Like, do you grab onto them sometimes, or?
Yeah. The nice thing about our coding as humans is that,
by the way, you said DNA and coding now.
Yeah.
So
I'm just trying to throw those words in there.
I like it. That's good.
We're trying to get more followers for this podcast. So I'm using the words
so genetic engineers.
Yeah. That we do keep those really, really happy times, and we keep them with us to fuel us in the times of that are challenging. And
that's how you describe them, as happy times? Like, can you give me more of a
happy,
deeper?
I mean, not, because obviously happiness is, that's changing with the wind.
I think it's deeper for us as musicians, though. Like, what are those moments for you?
Those moments to me are what make dating very difficult, because they are so profoundly outside of myself, where I feel like we're all one, and it's a thing that made me love music from the beginning, was it was the place that I felt like I could go to where you don't have to be able to speak Japanese
Mm-hmm.
or whatever language of wherever it's a language.
Mm-hmm.
um, and and there's just like there are many memories of great conversations I've had with people in my life. It's almost that memory of it's a great conversation. That's what it feels like.
Okay.
This is the memory of a great conversation, because music is a conversation, and it's a conversation that goes way deeper than any of our syllables can possibly describe. And that sounds amazing. Like
That's interesting. I'm remembering a conversation. That's.
it feels like that. I mean, I've had some conversations in my life with people that I'll never forget, and I kind of keep with them with me, similar to a video game character that's keeping them as like a weapon or something like that for when they have to go back into battle. And touching on the music as your job, it's a dangerous place anytime you make what you love your job.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone needs a job. That's the world. Ever since the dawn of agriculture, that's been the world. We live in a business-run planet, and you're always going to have a job, even if you're in Coldplay. That's your job, and eventually there's going to be
You're
some
telling
days
me it
where
gets tiresome going na 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 na. Probably.
The thing is, though, that the way they play that though is brilliant, because they play it perfectly.
I love it. I mean, but in the live setting, you're getting a reaction to that.
That's everything is going to fade, and
Yes.
everything is going to get tiresome, and then you're going to move on to the next thing. We're human. It's the funny thing was like what Netflix did when they were trying to figure out how to get us to choose, like, what do you like to do? And that's what they first tried, is we're gonna select what movies we like, what type of movies we like. We don't know what we like. We do, and then we do it, and then we don't like it anymore. And it's kind of, I think that sort of thing about the ever-changing, migratory nature of the human soul is what
is it changing,
is what
or
explains
is it changing, or is it growing?
Well, I mean, if we're gonna support the Darwin things, we're gonna say, well, it's growing.
I mean, a tadpole grows legs. Well, if we're talking about Darwin, I mean, there's the question is what do we lose along the way? Like, you're telling me that there are some experiences that you like something, and then all of a sudden you don't like something.
It's not that you don't like it. It's just that it changes, and it becomes a job because of the expectations of it. And I've recently been trying to figure out how can I compartmentalize these things, because I've always seen music, a career in music is very much like running a mutual fund. You have this one gig is this type of stock, this other gig is this type of stock, this other gig is this type of stock, and let's just make sure that you manage a portfolio that is continually growing. And the tough thing is when that one stock is failing and it's going down and down and down and down, and you then have to use the joy that you're getting from this stock that's, oh, this one's going up, use that, and use the memories of the good times to propel yourself to carry forward. And I think it's an ever-growing thing. We're always growing, and nowadays our egos are growing. Like, just our egos and our self, it's evolving, you know.
It's interesting that you talk about stocks, because I was talking with Roy about that, about how we have so many things that we have to do as we grow our mutual fund. Now that I can talk about it in that perspective, that's really fascinating, because the way that we took it to a certain level and you took it one past, but you grow your stocks in certain things, and then you could sell those stocks off. And at what point do you say, I don't really ever need to buy that stock again? And we used examples of like I used an example of playing, a frat party for $135 in Alabama, driving through the.
Did you do that?
Oh God, yeah, it was terrible.
$135.
$135.
It only paid $135.
10 years ago when I first came.
Okay,
to town.
well, 135 is great compared to the first gig that I ever got, but 135, that's great. Why 35? Why not like 36 or 40?
The leader,
41.
The leader's
135. It wasn't 125. You know that the leader was like
taking 15.
I'm gonna give him
everybody's
125, and then he like started dating this new girl. So he's like, you know what? I'm gonna be a nice guy. I'm gonna give him $10 more.
That's so fascinating that you saw it that way, because the way that I saw it is he got 150 a man, and then he took $15 off.
Ooh,
See,
wow!
that's the way I saw it.
Wow!
So you look at the light.
That is the difference between you and me.
Skepticism is not a good quality.
Well,
it's got how you survive though, man. I mean, I've been thinking about that a lot. It's like when you've been hustling since you were 17 years old and you dropped off in school and you're like, okay, go to work. How do you maintain that level of, like, you have to be skeptical of people. You have to look at somebody and go, I'll tell you this, there's nobody on this planet that owes me money. And I have a great story about that. So there's this guy I won't say his name, but back in school, we used to play these big band gigs when the Squirrel Nut Zippers were popular, and the bum bum ba-da-da, bum bum ba-da-da, whatever song that is. Yeah. So we did these big band gigs, and
wasn't that Jump Driving Well?
That's Jump Driving Well. It's a different band, yeah. But that whole thing was going on. So we got this big band gig, and we had this
Squirrel Nut Zippers.
Squirrel Nut Zippers.
That was a different thing.
One of those guys. I don't really know.
Great name. Okay.
Yeah. So we flew to Colorado, and he promised us X amount of dollars, and the gig was over, and he's like telling everybody he doesn't have it. He doesn't have it. He doesn't have it. I'll get it to you when we get back. I'll get it to you when we get back. Tell you what, man, I grabbed that lead alto book and I put it in my suitcase, and there was at least 1,000 charts in there. And
oh man, well, how do you feel about that?
I don't feel good about it.
Yeah,
but that's how I had to pay my rent. So what happened is I get home.
That's a hard situation.
You can't replace that book. And he said, man, I can't pay you, Tyler. I said, well, do you have gigs this weekend? He's like, I have 2 gigs. I was like, cool. Well, you need to drive all the way to my house with $400 in cash. Otherwise, you ain't getting your book back.
Ooh, man. You played hardball.
I had to, man.
Yeah.
I got to eat.
Oh, man. I had to
eat, dude.
Oh, yeah.
That's the kind of skepticism that exists when you've been hustling for so long.
That's a hard thing. I mean, I guess I feel kind of lucky that I got bruised early on by a lot of different situations.
I mean, you don't want to feel that way.
Where you learn from them.
Mm-hmm. What do you do, though? Do you just say, I'm not taking the gig? You need the gig. I made $75 on a Friday and $75 on a Saturday, and then $350 on the Sunday at church. And without that money, man, I wouldn't have made it through school,
Yeah.
I needed it, right?
Oh, God.
So do you burn the bridge with the guy that can't pay you? Or do you stand up for yourself so that every gig from that point on, I said, I want $75 cash on my stand in an envelope before I play a note? And I'm probably the only person on planet Earth that he doesn't owe money to. I'm not proud of that, but I'm thankful that I got to eat,
I don't know if I would have acted in the same way, but I know that what would I have done? I would have gone back home. Gosh, that's a hard thing. This is hard, especially when you need the money in order to pay a certain thing. See, I would always save money, save, and I would do whatever it took to not totally freak out, because which is why I didn't really go out and didn't really do a whole lot of fun things ever. What everyone else was doing, all the cool kids were doing, I never really did a whole lot of those things early on because I couldn't afford to. And I would always try to look in the future of like, what happens if they don't pay me? Because early on, I was lucky. Early on, I had people not pay me, and I had people do things that were like, okay, I got to be prepared for this.
Yeah.
So the struggle that you had to feel is like, it was like a fight or flight situation. You
Absolutely.
chose to fight. I choose to flight. So does that make me any better than you? No.
Absolutely
That
not.
like I think that's what people need. And there's some guys out there that need, like, we need people that stand up for themselves, and as well as people who can just go with the flow of certain things. And that's just nature. You have people who fight and people who flight.
But if we're going back to the mutual fund idea, if it's a point of where we're investing in our mutual funds, and we're just making sure that at certain points as a musician, and that's the thing that I want to get across. I don't want to complain. I mean, we have beautiful lives now.
Oh, we're spoiled.
It's
spoiled,
but it's always
rotten.
in the back of your mind of where you've come from, and everybody has stories about that. I mean, no matter what industry you're in, you've always I mean, my dad worked at McDonald's in the 70s, and there was a car fire, and he grabbed a fire extinguisher and jumped over the counter and saved these two people and put the car fire out. Came back in, and the manager said, "Why did you jump over the counter?" It's like we've all had those experiences of you're just trying to make it, you're trying to survive, and I think that's a part of who we are. So we're very lucky now, but the question is, when do you sell the stock and reinvest in yourself?
In this situation, though, that we were talking about, you head-on confronted a bully, which
is not
which
it's
needs
really
to happen
difficult
sometimes.
for me to do.
It's difficult. I've done it in the past too, where
it's not my nature.
Where sometimes you do have to confront that person, because that person is going to hurt other people, and you got to make sure that doesn't happen. But
in a fight or flight situation, you can give people advice on what you think their best situation is, and you can see them getting hurt, but all you can do is that, and then at some point you have to step back and go, I can't, this isn't right. I got to look out for myself in the situation.
I think as what I always want is that the people around me are being treated well.
I totally
And
agree.
that's it's a hard situation when you get in a band or you get hired on a gig where you're not around people that believe that.
Well, even if it's, I saw a really great quote on the good old Instagram the other day, because it's full of great quotes, evidently.
Instant quotes.
Instant quotes.
You can get a quote.
You could put 5 words
I could get a quote, a brilliant quote, in probably less than 10 seconds, guaranteed.
Yeah. Well, this was a good one. Sometimes there's good ones, and it came from a person that believes this, which I think is really cool. Which is the important part. If you got to look at where it's coming from, and it said, "Your brand is what they say when you're not there." And I love that. And I think I think your brand is everything. Your brand is how you carry yourself. Your brand is how you treat people, and your brand is your word. And I think that's a little bit about what you're saying about you want everybody around you to be treated fairly. If you get somebody in, and I've gotten friends into situations, and I want to make sure that I look at how they're going to be treated in the situation, whether it's financially or whether it's personally,
sure,
and try to protect them if it's bad. But if I see it as a good outcome, then I want to make sure that it's good. But I want to make sure that we push forward, But I think that there comes a point where I think as you get further along in music and your brand grows, then you can be a little bit more, you can take more risks. Like buying a different stock, you're not buying a bond, you're buying the next Google, you hope, What do you think?
Sure. That is definitely the, are you saying just from a business perspective?
Well, when we were talking about when do you stop taking certain things? So that's a struggle with musicians.
Sure.
As you work your way up the ladder, when do you stop taking a frat party? Is it when you have enough bonds that you know that you don't need that frat party? When does that fear leave you?
I got a text message the other day that said, "Hey, Steven, do you still play keys?" ? And it was from a number that I didn't recognize. Turns out it was a manager that of a band that I had played in, and.
What do you answer that? No, I stopped.
And so I my only response was well, I guess I should only, do I still play keys? Yes, I do. I don't know. I think I know what she's asking, or he's asking, because I didn't know whether it was a guy or girl. And and so my response was, yeah, like, yeah, I still play music. I still make music for a living. I still do that. Um, and then the conversation opens up to this sort of thing. And I think as you grow in your business, you you then have to make certain choices of investing in areas that you almost, the diversify concept, you then have to switch that. And then you have to be like, well, I'm going to try to do this and this. And I guess changing your business model, like my model from the beginning was, oh, I'll take everything. I'll take every gig I can possibly get. And do you play wedding ceremonies? Yes, I do. I'd never played a wedding ceremony ever. But I knew I could do it, and I learned the music for it, and I was gonna do a good job, because and then you get to the point where you don't need to do all those because you have X, Y, and Z gigs that are helping you get through and pay your rent, and then you start inventing new things because you're always on this entrepreneurial. Is that the right pronunciation?
I think so.
You're always on that path, so then you're inventing new ways of doing things.
Well, what does that mean to you, though? That's my curious thing. For you doing what you want to do is currency, as I think it is for me as well.
Yeah.
I mean, being able to go somewhere and do what you want to do is worth way more than standing in front of thousands of people.
You just have this thing inside you that you have to get out, that you have to communicate, that you. It's just like in love. You wanna feel loved and give love and reciprocate it, and it's kind of it feels like that. There's this like thing that you have to get out, and I think that's what is driving it, right? Is that what we're talking about?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think so. I think there's a need for sure to share yourself. I mean, I'd take it even further, and this is just my perspective on it. Is I've come to terms with the fact that I have been so concentrated on building up mutual funds that I have missed snapshots of my own personal life in music. Like when you create a piece of music, you can go back and go, I remember when I made that and what I was feeling when I made that, and that makes me a little sad.
I think everything is perfect the way it's happening.
I did.
And the way it is. Yeah. And I found a lot of comfort in what someone said to me a few months ago, which was, you're a lifer. Like, you're in it for a lifetime. And that's how I felt when I was singing, like, classical music, was just the human voice, the male voice. For a tenor, I'm gonna train. If I'm just in classical music, I'm just doing opera and art songs and everything like that. I'm training and I'm shooting for my 30s. And if I'm a bass baritone, I'm shooting for my 40s, because that's when my actual voice is going to mature to its fullest. And then from there, that's when your career really starts.
Jeez.
So
you started in that headspace.
It's funny because people are like, oh man, you really got to do this and do this. And I'm like, I've always been looking at music from the perspective of, I'm shooting for my 30s and 40s.
Wow.
To really, because I want to just do the best that I can do with what I've been, I guess, given, or whatever you want to say. I see that as a much longer time frame. So when someone ever says to me like, oh, I'm too old, I'm like, you're not too old. You're never too old to say something that has impact. And if you wait until you're 40 to write a solo album, nowadays we live in a society where you can actually make money and support yourself if you make the right business choices. You can actually support your art as a 45-year-old man in the industry. You're not going to be Ariana Grande, and you're not going to be a pop star, but you can be in the game. Yeah. So the game is much, obviously the spread is much different. Where,
That is so
but
fascinating.
there's
man.
actually a chance. Like
Mhm.
the whole 1,000 true fans thing is correct. And even like, what are you trying to do? Like right now, you're trying to support yourself, to allow yourself the time to really say something that and really do the deep work. And that's the thing, is getting deep work out. And that I'm slow, other people are fast and can do it. And
Man,
so
I
to
love that idea.
to
that-
someone, even someone like you who's like working on all these different things, it's like, dude, you got until you're I mean, you're gonna die, and then you're gonna go, I don't know, you're gonna go to the next exit along the path of energy, whatever universe we're in. But yeah, you have so much time.
Yeah, being rooted in that from the beginning of setting those expectations for yourself. I mean, that's intense because when you're growing up in the industry and music, it's like I have never heard that before. That is blowing my mind because
Really?
yeah, I did. First of all, I didn't know that because I wasn't around a lot of.
It's a long
classical
roller
singers.
coaster.
But what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
in music, everything is so now. Got to get it done now.
Sure.
Gotta get
Oh,
it done
pop
now.
music, yeah.
I think music in general. I mean, whenever you're like playing a show, you got to get ready for the show. You got to know this song. You got to know that song. You got to know where the harmony is. Then the show's over. Then you're getting ready for the next one, and then you move into I'm good at session. Okay, I got to write charts. I got to do this. I got to do that. That especially in my world, because it's like the song. It's the last thing before it goes to mix. So they're like, okay, the horns are done. Hey man, can you come tomorrow? Can you get it? Everything is now done. And you're telling me that there's an element of the music industry that exists that I had never thought of, where it has to do with your actual physical body changing
Yeah.
and having expectations of every 10 years you're going to be doing something different and you're not going to have a career until you hit 40. That's a mind-blowing philosophy to plant your seed in, is what you've done. You planted your apple tree as to understand that you're going to grow to this beautiful apple tree. And now you've made changes, but to keep that philosophy from the beginning, I have never heard that before.
It's the only thing that keeps me sane.
Dude, that is mind-blowing. You might have just changed my world with
Yeah,
that.
right. I just changed your world in one cup of coffee.
This could happen. This is a pretty good coffee.
I mean, I feel very lucky to meet all these people who are so way more talented than I am in the pop industry. And when I say pop industry, anything to me that's not classical music is pop music.
Mm-hmm.
So jazz, anything that's not Stravinsky is pop music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I've found comfort in, is the fact that I trained when I was in college. I trained with a guy who was my teacher's teacher, and he was like 65, and that dude had so F#4 was like where his passaggio lied, the break point between his chest voice and his like head voice, whatever you want to call it. It was so remarkable, and you really see that that music is a very long craft, and you're always going up to search within yourself to do the thing that's the same as going out back and trying to work on your golf swing and continually get better at it. It's this well that you can put everything into, and if you take care of yourself physically and mentally, you'll get to the place where when you're 65, it doesn't matter if you're a pop star. What matters is that you've grown in your own journey, and that's what's attractive. That when I hear a Jim Croce song, I don't hear a teeny bopper 17-year-old kid trying to tell me about what life's like. I hear a dude who's mature, who has a family, who's done jobs and all these sorts of things, who's like telling me something, It makes me feel things, because I'm like, all right, I'm learning a lesson right now. Like, you got this guy, don't mess around with Jim. Okay, I'm going to stay away from guys named Jim. But that's kind of, that's what keeps me keeps me going and loving it, and keeps me loving listening to other people and listening to what other people have to say, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it goes back to your. I think the a toolbox like we talked about is giving you more tools to express how you're feeling in a moment. But if we were to take it further and find ways to open up roadblocks that exist in our brain to create something that matters to us, do you feel tools and roadblocks are equivalent? The more tools you have, the more roadblocks you burst through?
Ooh, man. Like, what kind of roadblocks are they manned by a police force?
I think roadblocks to me.
Is it a construction site? What kind of roadblock is it?
Roadblocks can be whatever you want them to be.
The more tools you have, definitely I think we found that early on in songwriting, is that the more tools you have to express yourself, the more fun it is. The more paths you can choose. You can at least choose. Not fun, and the more you can better express yourself. And
that's it. I mean, I would consider songwriting being a roadblock, and I would consider production being tools. Maybe we can separate those things. Because songwriting, you can have tools, but there's no tricks in songwriting. I mean,
there are tools though, because if I take
there are roads that you
secondary
can go down.
Dominance. Once you get into
but now
even
you're talking
doing
production. I guess songwriting to you. See, to me, I'm thinking lyrics.
Oh,
when
okay,
you're saying
okay.
Songwriting,
Yeah, to me, I think I realized the other day the reason why lyrics are so challenging to me is because I always was just a melody head. Like, I always sang in German and sang this melody and just really dug that. And
I mean, were you ingesting the lyrics about if they meant something? Like were you putting emotion across?
I was looking at it compositionally on the musical side, so I was looking at it from a different.
So you were
thing,
seeing the arc of the melody and feeling the emotion through the arc, not through what the words were saying.
But I think too, someone who is like a lyricist, most lyricists, like really good lyricists, read a lot, and they study poetry, or they do all these things that fill up their well with tools to get through the roadblocks. I think that's the thing musically as well, is that you have I was seeing it from the music side, but from the let's say you're trying to tell a story, for example, the idea of, hey man, the story is great and the first verse is great, but it needs more furniture, is like a nice tool to be like, all right, cool, I need to put some colors and some shapes, and I need to describe the room a little bit more. And that's like from the lyric side. From the musical side, maybe your melody is staying on this one thing, and it's like, okay. How should we grow that melody? And I think from working with you, I learned a lot about the way that the arc of a melody can make the audience feel. And then if you're looking at, like, if I know 2 chords on the piano, I'm only going to be able to say so much, you know? So if I only know 2 chords, better hope my lyrics are pretty good. But if I know a bunch of other things, then maybe I can have kind of simpler lyrics, and it's all like finding
it's about finding the attention,
the
like where
balance
the attention
between
is.
Yeah.
So dude, tell me about what you mean when you're talking about how you can have 2 chords and the lyric is there, but the lyric is incredibly interesting, and the chords, if there are more than that, can get in the way. So when you're saying if you have more than 1 chord under your belt and you have more of a harmony thing going on, do you feel like you have, so if you have if the attention span of the listener is at 100, do you feel like you're carving up a pie in your production to make sure that you're not exceeding the 100, or do you kind of flirt with that? Like, do you feel like if you have this crazy drum thing that's happening, that's processed and all this stuff, and if you put something simple on top of it, you have this juxtaposition that gets you to that 100? Like, how do you look at your productions? Like, do you listen to something and go, that needs another melody there to kind of keep the interest? Or
Yeah. The hard thing is, it just like painting, you don't want to put too much at them at one time. It's kind of like like always having the rule of thirds or triangles. With I think defining what the project is or what the song is, like take a song like A Horse with No Name, like that's just that 2 chords over and over.
Yeah. What a great song.
Oh yeah. What is that song? That's gonna be a song that everybody can play around the campfire, as compared to take a song from Radiohead's most recent album.
I was thinking Radiohead,
Like
but then I was
Burn the
going back
Witch.
to Creep, and
You're
I'm
not
like,
gonna.
well, you could play Creep around the
No,
campfire
yeah, you
too.
could play Creep, but you're not going to. The intention is that you're not going to play Burn the Witch. It's not. You don't want it to be relatable on that level. So you're painting a different piece. So it's. I think defining what kind of world that's going to live in allows for you to make creative decisions with how you're going to write it, how you're going to.
So you're saying,
it.
but when you say creative world, what makes me interested in that is the fact that are you saying that how it's going to be perceived?
Not how it's going to be perceived.
Because you said,
I see it,
that song is for a campfire.
Well,
I mean, obviously Neil Young didn't write that for a campfire.
No. I see it as I see everything kind of in like movies, which might be a bad thing, but
that's interesting.
Everything is always
so there's a story.
Always scenes and stories,
Okay.
yeah, and always like you like have to have a story in your mind, and it's down to, did this tell the story, or man, your story's kind of boring. And how are you going to tell the story? And there's a certain thing musically where, I mean, you hold on a verse for too long and like get me to the chorus. It just depends what the relationship of the melody and the harmony and the lyrics are in telling that actual story. And for some people, telling the story exists over the entire album. I see Radiohead's most recent album is very similar to me, or is very similar to me as like something like Dichterliebe, which is the song cycle, you know. I see it more like that, where it's telling this story over the arc of many songs, not just one song. So the question is, where is the period, the art of the period? Like, is the period, is the story over at 3 minutes? Or is this part of a 36-minute piece? And I think figuring that out helps. Of like, what kind of creature are we building here? What kind of world does this song exist in?
I mean, you could even go to the point of saying that you don't get to a quote unquote chorus until the third song on the record, you know, even though there may be little
Are we talking about
along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. It's composed like more in the classical style of like, well, you have the first 2 movements and then the third movement really gets you, you know.
It's just precursor.
It's all just like tension and release and tension and release, and
that to me is the most interesting part of that to me is the most interesting part of music, because I think that comes down to so many different people's preferences. Like, I mean, tension and release. If you don't have a tension point in what you're doing musically, to me, it's uninteresting. So, and I think that what exists in the tension point now in today's pop music is mostly rhythmic based, would be my guess. Whereas, I mean, even if you go back to the jazz point, where you like, I mean, I grew up playing jazz.
It's very simple harmonically music nowadays.
Very simple
is
harmonically.
So simple, yeah.
And then you have
rhythmically very complex.
You have a tension, yeah, and then you have a drop. You know, you have your big drop thing, and it's very tribal. You know, incredibly tribal.
Also, sorry.
I was just gonna say, it's interesting that over the course of genres that have happened since we've really started consuming music, you know, the tension points, I think, is what defines the genre. So you've got your 70s, you've got your tension points of a James Taylor song that's not going to be rhythmic based. It's going to be mostly lyric based, or a Neil Young where the tension points are melodic, like these beautiful sailing melodies that resolve, you know. And I think that, I think telling a story, I'm just spitballing here because I have a tendency to do that, but if you're talking about telling a story, and I'm not an author, but you would sit there and you would have your bad guy, your good guy, the tension point, and then you would write to those different points. And I think musically, I think that that's definitely a thing too. I mean, I think that without it, I mean, that's what makes great music. And if you don't have that tension point, but you can build, but I think people's tension points, in my opinion, or their ability to consume tension, which means attention span and the tension and release, their ability to consume tension has decreased. The amount of tension that they can consume. That's the biggest difference that I've seen.
The world is so fast nowadays.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about that at the beginning, for sure.
It is.
But to put it in a musical term, to put it in a musical sense of...
The tension releases real quick now.
Yeah,
you got a little bit of tension, release. A little bit of tension, release. Yeah. Whereas, like...
Verses are shortened.
Yeah,
you listen to half.
You listen to a Beethoven piece and you're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Oh! Like, and that feeling happens over the span of like 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
Yeah, you're like, whoa.
Well, I think that's interesting for people that aren't in the music industry to understand, is that there are people, like, you can put a song into an algorithm and it can spit out whether it's going to be a hit. Because there are people that are in LA and New York and definitely Nashville now that are writing pop songs, and if they don't get to a chorus by 52 seconds, then it's not fast enough. And they go, how can we get there faster? And I think that's a business. It's a good business. That's the business part of it.
It's a good business,
sure. And that's what most people are consuming. They're consuming
good business.
They're consuming the business part of the money part of music. And then there are people that are looking for other things that are curious, and that goes back to your idea of 1,000 fans.
Yeah, I tend to get swallowed anytime in the hit chasing.
You look very overwhelmed right now.
Yeah, I am. For the viewers at home.
Is it the coffee?
for the viewers at home,
Don't talk about pop music.
I think it's incredible the people who have the stamina to chase the hits. I mean, those are like the guys who are like, yeah, I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna catch that deer.
Dude, yeah, that's a good point, man.
And
with whatever, with the best gun that you could, like, even with a bomb. I'm gonna drop a bomb from a helicopter to get that deer.
Whereas for me, you're
the crossbow guy.
I'm lucky. No, I'm not even the crossbow guy. I'm the guy that goes out fishing.
Fishing.
I'm the guy that's like, yeah, I'll bring it back. And
does it have a barb or is it barbless? Do you want to make it difficult on yourself?
No, I wonder. I think
do you have a rod, or is it just a fishing line that you have to reel in by hand?
I think it would just be a fish. I think just a fishing line.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah.
I think that would be your vibe for sure.
Or plants. I'd probably just harvest. I'm definitely a harvester. Yeah. Definitely not a. I'm definitely of the harvester mindset.
Well, let's wrap up there, dude. So, how do people find you?
Well, people can find me on, if they just type my name in, StephenMullan.com. I made that when I was about 20 years old. And they can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Stephen, Steven, Mullan, Mullan, just like Mullan, yes, one extra L. I'm going to be doing a lot of things in the future that will have different names to them, but it's kind of all going to come from me.
Right on.
At that source. So.
Yeah, and all the things that you've done thus far are beautiful. So
thank you
for sharing that.
Thanks for having me and inviting me over, and for this beautiful, delicious coffee, this water, and for taking the time to listen to me wander through my thoughts.
Always, my friend.
Thank you. You're wonderful.
Peace.
Watch this heavy heart of mine turn this water into wine. Light your match and let it glow, so I know my way home. One more game of tic-tac-toe. You be X and I'll be you. Fall in love like dominoes, then I'll come back home. If I can't find you, go get lost in the simple things. Might I remind you, chase your tail and dream those dreams. One more glass to set me free. Forget right past what's in front of me. I'll be fine, they tell me so, 'cause I know my way home.